many people, by show of hands, have ever felt burned out, stressed out, and maxed out? Well, we definitely all have, and that is something that we want to talk about today because it's such an important issue and it is so relevant to who we are and what we do in any industry. Burnout costs between $125 billion and $190 billion every year in healthcare costs. Now, researchers estimate that workplace stress accounts for 8% of national spending on healthcare.
In one poll of nearly 3,000 people, almost half of employees reported missing time at work from work-related stress, and 61% said that the stress had made them physically sick.
So what is the solution? What we want to be able to do is help you define a culture that leads for positive mental health, that uses healthy leadership to tap into the potential of all of the individuals as well as the people in the organization as a whole. Now, most of you probably know what that is. Yes, of course, it's the good old Slinky toy that most of us had when we were a kid. So why does the Slinky do that? Why does it go up and down? Well, it oscillates like that for a very simple reason. It's made that way. The structure of the Slinky causes the behavior of oscillation. Structure causes behavior within an organization. And if we want to define a culture, what we need to be able to do is understand that if we choose to default to a culture where the conversations around mental health are not normalized, and if we choose to default to a culture where there is a stigma around mental health, what happens is that breaks down individuals and it breaks down entire organizations. So what we want to be able to help you do today is to define a culture of healthy leadership that leads for positive mental health. And when we do that, not only are we going to have positive human and financial impact for individuals, this is going to thread the needle between mental health and total wellness and business results. It is possible to thread the needle when we focus on mental health and we also focus on creativity and efficiency and effectiveness and innovation within our companies. We can always thread the needle between mental health and business results.
And that experience was profound. What I did was went to Hallmark and bought small cards, and I put an inspirational note on each card. And so as I was sitting in my vehicle waiting for someone to request a ride, eventually their name popped up. And on that card, I would write the person's name. So let's go with Samantha. Samantha's my next rider. I would write her name down on that card and put it into the back seat. So when she opened up the door, she saw a card with her name on it. Within 5 minutes, Samantha and I had an engaged conversation because she saw my compassion and she opened up to her anxiety attack that morning. Interestingly enough, I picked her up at a park in Altamont Springs, Florida. And when I picked her up, the very first thing I said was, "I really appreciate you putting in some self-care this morning." And she looked at me and she said, "Well, what makes you say that?" And I says, "Well, it's a Saturday morning. I'm picking you up at a park. And I just thought that it was interesting that you chose to invest in self-care." Less than 5 minutes, and I had an authentic conversation. Now, I don't know if it was her that wrote this, but at one point in time during my Uber rides, I had someone do a review, and they said I saved their life. Could you imagine the number of lives that we could impact if we all started to show more compassion and destigmatize the conversations around mental health? We have an everyday opportunity to help a loved one, a brother, a sister, or even a colleague. The power of heart starts with compassion.
Now, when we talked about being burned out, stressed out, and maxed out, really and truly, at the end of the day, there are three things that cause us stress: the need to be right, the need to be in control, and the need to be all things to all people. We want to be able to put that aside and learn to deal with stress in a constructive way. Here's why. When we have high stress and we deal with stressful situations in a destructive way, what happens is that leads us to have low resilience. Well, this is what you call a negative feedback loop. It's a vicious cycle, because when you have low resilience, then what happens is that loops around and causes more stress. Dealt with in a destructive way, our resilience continues to go down. The idea is we want to be able to deal with stress in a positive and constructive way, and at the same time, what happens is not only does this negative feedback loop go dormant, we actually create a positive feedback loop where we're dealing with stress in a positive way, we're raising our resilience, we're improving our productivity, our profitability at work, we're increasing our efficiency and effectiveness and creativity and innovation, and all of those things that come from healthy leadership.
According to one nationwide review, 98% of medium to large organizations in the United States provide an employee assistance program to their employees, but the utilization rate is less than 4% every single year. So, how do we create a happy and healthy organization and workplace? How do we have individuals be happy and healthy, engaged, creative, and productive? The Mental Hygiene Project has the Mental Hygiene Project Resilience Formula. The first piece of the formula talks about personal resilience capacity building. This is the ability for an individual to learn how to maintain composure and adaptability, have optimism, growth, mindset, and gratitude in what they do. Now, they also understand that resilience is not a destination, it's a journey.
When we're talking about all of these organizational systems and personal systems for resilience, we want to make it a committed, collaborative effort within your company. It was interesting in terms of, as I was standing in front of the room, I happened to notice this one gentleman. And when he was pushing back, he was pushing back. I mean, the veins in his head were popping out. And then we had a great conversation in the debrief about how, when we're experiencing change, it's important to go with the flow of positive energy as opposed to pushing back. So we all had a great discussion about that. People asked questions. We engaged for about 10 minutes. And then I walked back, about halfway back in the room, and I said, "Sir, could you put your hand up?" He said, "Sure." So he put his hand up. I put my hand on his. I pushed, and he very nearly pushed me through the wall. Even after we had that discussion, I said, "Sir, if you don't mind, why did you push so hard even after we had the discussion about how important it is to go with the flow of energy for positive change?" He was a pretty thoughtful guy. Paused. He said, "Because I didn't want to feel vulnerable." So, ladies and gentlemen, change can make us feel vulnerable. And yet the good news is, when we're working together to create healthy leadership, it can transform individuals and organizations in a positive way, both from a total wellness perspective and also from the perspective of business results.